If you're going to go explain to the CFO, hey, I want to buy this new shiny thing, we need it, and it's not in the budget, go, no. But if you're like, hey, these systems here are at risk. If these things go down, we lose $100 a minute. You can do the math. I need $50,000 to make that, 50% less likely. Oh, cool. That's an easy conversation, right?
Welcome to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. In each episode, we dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity. Join us as we cover the latest trends, innovations, and practical insights as we talk with leaders and practitioners across the industry. Gear up and let's get into this week's episode.
Hi, this is Dino and I have a guest today. I have Wil Klusovsky. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast. So I usually like to begin with your journey into this OT cybersecurity realm. So let's talk a little bit about your journey to get to where you came from to where you are today.
Yeah, man, I did not have probably the traditional journey. I don't think maybe nobody had a traditional journey in OT. And like we were talking kind of before the show, I'm by no means a deep OT expert. I've been doing cybersecurity and IT for 26 years now. Most of that time I spent in consulting and managed security organizations. And during that time, I just gravitated towards, there's a problem, I'll go fix it. So like I built and led pre-sales, I built the channel, I built a few practice areas, I was a product manager, I've done a lot of different things. And I ask a lot of questions. And I have a pretty good, strong sales mindset for, business cases. And I was at an organization that wanted to do operational technology. As a start, we were doing managed security for OT, right? So it was the early days of Clarity and whatnot. And I was like, should we be doing that? Like, what's the market? Like, I started asking all of the questions about, have we even done the research? Do we know if our clients are going to buy it? Because at the time, I had multi-billion-dollar manufacturing clients who still didn't run IDS. They were just running a stateful firewall, and that was it, right? So I'm like, you guys are going to get them to spend money on putting stuff on the shop floor where they don't think there's a problem. So all those questions basically got me into, cool, you can build the product and service out for us.
Yeah. So when you're having these conversations, so you spend a lot of time in front of clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so are they primarily the IT leadership, or is it the board, or is it a combination of both? And do you see them kind of getting their OT colleagues to the table and or their partners, organizations like ours, which, we spend, our livelihood being born in manufacturing is on the plant floor, right? And as a technology company, as an OEM, as a system integrator, we networking, cybersecurity. So tell us a little bit about how those conversations go. I've seen your don't say this and say this instead, which I think is brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant. And I'd love for you to talk about that, because I think that's really relevant in the conversations with some of those risk people, the board executives, throughout the organization.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned how do you, first off, who you're talking to always depends. And kind of tailing off with a story I had there where I was like, who's buying this? So when I learned about it and realized, okay, this is the solution, the service, and why it's relevant, I was like, okay, cool, I get this. And then what I would do is we would go to the manufacturing organizations, and usually this was 15 years ago, at least, maybe more or less. We'd go in and they may not even have, there is no IT, right? The OT organization, the shop floor has their own operating officer, and they kind of do what they do. And sometimes we'd be talking to the enterprise risk management team, because those organizations might not even have CIOs or CTOs or anything like that. So a lot of times you're talking to network managers, and the goal was to get the business owners in the room somehow, the people that cared. And the easy thing to do was go, how do you make your money? And they'd look and go, those Rockwell devices, those Siemens devices, that shop floor over there, that cranks out the widgets and that makes money. And then I go, what are you doing to protect it? And there's no response.
Because it's not connected to anything, which is not true.
Oh yeah, everything's air gapped. We all know that's true. Nobody throws in, Yeah, nobody definitely didn't plug in a Windows NT server 30 years ago so that the vendor could do patches because they didn't want to come out to the shop every 6 months. Like that definitely doesn't happen.
Or fix it. If something's not working right, you're going to wait for somebody to get on a plane and show up a week or 10 days later that's coming from Germany or Italy to work on that piece of equipment that's critical to your process. And I've had some plant people say, yeah, we do. And I know they don't. They eventually cough up, we got a jump server, we got a cellular cradle point there, or some VPN concentrator, or we plug the cable into the enterprise network to get the machine online, to them to get to it. So there's always a method to it, how they get into that space.
Right. Well, and it's funny you mentioned that because I was led to believe, and I think this is true, a lot of the companies that create like that do security for the OT environment spawned from asset visibility, right? I'm pretty sure Clarity, as an example, like before they were doing security, they were there to help you know what assets you had, right? What was actually on the shop floor? What was running? How can we be more efficient? Why is that machine down 30 hours a week when it could be running and cranking out, money for us? And so I think the security was kind of born out of that. So to go back to your point of most people don't even know what they have. They think they do, but every one of us who's ever done an audit or assessment has walked around and always found things that people didn't know was there.
Yeah,
Air quotes.
we just did a project this summer with a very large adult beverage manufacturer who's had a tool, like a Clarity tool in their environment for several years, right? Throughout their manufacturing environments. And they were 135% off on the number of assets that were actually in the plant compared to what they were using the TIDS to collect for them. So it happens every time, and IT organizations that lead a lot of these efforts, but don't spend any time on the plant floor. And I mean, really on the plant floor, inside those control system, panels that are out there to make the determination, what am I missing? Versus what am I, seeing with the tool? And like your questions, just don't say this, say this. This is the classic example of, well, you can trust, but I like to verify, is the role that especially if you're going to hire me to come in and take some role and responsibility of service and supporting and maintaining your environment. And that's just the case. Oh, we see this stuff morph into shelfware. We've seen that too.
Yeah, I see that happen so much. And usually the culprit is, well, it's two things. It's OCM, there's no organizational change management that's associated with us implementing something new and impacting the way everybody works. So that's one thing. And because there's none of that, there's no adoption. And when you get people who are like sort of outside the OT world, MFA is kind of actually probably in the OT world too, a little bit. Like MFA is a big example. It changes everybody's way they log in and do things. And if you don't explain to them before why they need to do it, how it's going to be helpful, how to do it, and they just come in the next day and it's like that, everybody raises their hand and screams, and everybody who's in charge of revenue and uptime are like, unplug that thing, we changed our mind.
Yeah. Well, things like MFA, it's few and far in between. We have clients that were going to lose their insurance if they didn't put in MFA. But I will tell you, on average, the work that we do, you'll find 5, 6, 7 different avenues of technologies that are being used to get into that one single plant. And if you've got 30 or 50 plants in your fleet, well, you can do the multiplier and find out exactly how many different tunnels you may have in your environment that you're unaware of, right? And it's not necessarily IT's fault, because a lot of that stuff is put in by the plant and by their suppliers, their OEMs and their system integrators that slap that stuff in to provide service and support to that client. And IT is none the wiser, I mean, a Sycomia VPN sitting out there in a machine center, it was just part of a capital project that, $20 million piece of equipment. And the cost of putting that thing in was just buried in there, or, those things are cheap and somebody just ran off and went and bought one and installed it. And again, IT's just they're not on top of it. And you're not going to get on top of it if you're not spending any time on the plant floor. That's the biggest challenge I've seen with some of the IT people that I've met, is they've either never been to the plant or they haven't been there in years. And when they do go, it's just a very cursory visit, maybe to work on something, and they're in the office environment or doing a tour guide walk through the plant and not really getting into the nuts and bolts of what's going on out there.
Right. And that kind of, like we talked about my piece of content on the board speak, but that kind of leads to like a deeper seated problem in all of that is for those individuals on the IT, cybersecurity, on the technical side, in the corporate world, in order to be able to communicate with the business and get the buy-in you need for the technology or the security tooling or whatever it is, you have to be able to explain why it matters to the business. And if you don't know how the business operates, you can't do that, right? So when I have people asking me, how do I convince my board or my CEO or COO or whoever to give me money to do these things, I'm like, well, what's the company's mission? And then tie that down. What's that person's metrics? What's your metrics? How is you buying this shiny thing going to help with that? Then it's not, because if you're going to go explain to the CFO, hey, I want to buy this new shiny thing, we need it, and it's not in the budget, go, no. But if you're like, hey, these systems here are at risk. If these things go down, we lose $100 a minute. You can do the math. I need $50,000 to make that, 50% less likely. Oh, cool. That's an easy conversation, right?
And I want to go down your board speak too, because I think that's important. But no, you're spot on about the downtime, right? Unplanned scheduled downtime is priority number one, right? How do I reduce that? Safety is always job one, but
yes,
job two is how do I reduce unplanned, unscheduled downtime? And to your point, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars a day, $100,000 an hour of downtime. These things pay for themselves because it's not just cybersecurity. There's a lot of benefit to that, but it's also process integrity. And what I mean by that, these tools can catch things that are disruptive, get themselves bad behavior on the client or their vendor's part that's disruptive, or IT, doing things and trying to do their due diligence, to do a better job and not realizing that they're messing up the control system communications and they fault or they stop because they want to go safe. And then that whole investigation begins. And if they can't find a mechanical issue and they can't put their finger on what happened, they just want to get back up and running.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody else about this because like you said, it's not just about, is there a breach, but it's because safety is paramount, right? That is the number one thing. So if you start to see slower production on something, that's a flag to go indicate what that is. And you can go see, and there's somebody on the shop floor going, yeah, I slowed it down. There was an issue with this. We're working it. Blah, blah. Okay, cool. Now I know what's going on. Everybody on the shop floor is happy that's going on. The people in operations are happy because, yeah, they're slowing things down to fix the issue, but that's better than letting it go and blow up and then really being down. So that visibility that you get from some of that technology and those processes, that's the other thing too. There is no buy this thing to solve a problem. Everything is a program, right? Everything that you buy, that you implement, has a program associated with it that requires people and processes to run and manage and execute and evolve on. It doesn't matter if it's the simplest little bit of technology or if it's a huge giant thing that's going to just change the way that you look at the world. You have to have the people and resources behind it.
Yeah. And those are in short supply in this space, right? I mean, and that's why we're seeing managed services change a little bit. I mean, the IT world has been doing managed services for quite a while, right? And to couple them with their enterprise systems, applications, their infrastructure, yada, yada, yada. On the plant floor side, we're starting to see that. I mean, organizations like ours exist from an engineering perspective because clients don't have an engineering team, right? To be able to do those integrations or to design those machines and program those machines. And all they are is support and maintenance piece, but they actually hire engineering firms like ours to come in there and do that work. And in all honesty, that's how you can tell an organization that's really got their act together, is because the CIO, the CISO, who owns that OT cybersecurity responsibility, is going to have to make some new friends. And those new friends are those groups, right? The third leg of the stool, as I call it. You got IT, you got OT, but you got those system integrators and those OEMs that play a critical part. And that's the piece that I see that's missing, in my view. To your board speak, do you have a relationship with your key partners that you spend millions of dollars a year with to help you run these plants? And the answer is no, they don't, because otherwise my phone would ring a lot more often from a CISO or CIO that says, hey, you're working in a handful of my plants, and I need to know more about your practice, your organization, your partnerships, your capabilities, and I have an OT cybersecurity strategy I need to get up off the ground. I might need some help.
Yeah. Again, this is hilarious because I just recorded a podcast with somebody else where we talked about CEOs asking questions they should ask the CISO. And one of those was do you know about our third-party risk? Have you assessed that third-party risk? And, the guy I was chatting with was the ultimate answer is yes. And They are involved in our recovery practices. They are involved in our tabletop exercises. We are communicating on a regular basis. We are aligned on roadmap, especially in the supply chain where it's so critical, right? Because if something gets hacked or has a problem and then that flows down to you, then that hurts everybody. I mean, we've seen that happen a couple of times. So having that relationship and that level of engagement between both parties is mutually beneficial and should happen.
Yeah. And the things I've seen hamper that a little bit are or your consulting groups that the IT people tend to normally attach themselves to. I'm not going to go down the list of
Sure.
you probably guess who they are. And a lot of the software companies that provide these cybersecurity technologies mostly have IT sellers as part of their business development organization. And the plant floor is an area they're unfamiliar with, right? They just want to sell the product, get it to IT's hands, call it a day. It's up to them to figure out how to really make it valuable and actionable and get that visibility that you want, organize and prioritize everything they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been another miss, right? Because again, you circle back around to our ecosystem, as I call it, the OT ecosystem, and we have to do a better job, right? And part of my job with my company is educating our partners and directors and our client-facing folks to start having that discussion. What is your OT cybersecurity strategy? What kind of tools are you using? Here's what our practice is. Maybe we can help you, And if you're not having that, leading that, because that's where the accountability and credibility comes. The OT people trust the folks that they work with all day, every day, and have for years. And so if they're starting to have those conversations with the people that they're normally doing business with, it kind of changes the whole dynamic to some extent. And IT is usually relieved because, it's like, they got buddies who actually understand this, they can help us. But I've had CISOs and CIOs I've heard, I don't want to be the SCADA cop. And I just keep IT and OT separated. I don't want to mess with it.
And I think a lot of them do. And a lot of it is just education, right? And then it comes down to it's also a business problem because again, if you talk about company goals and pushing down metrics, KPIs, who cares, where you're down to the individual contributor, how many people on the shop floor go to work every day and cybersecurity is part of their job, their mission? Probably very few, right? And because they do separate the two. And you're right on the vendor thing. I did have the privilege of working for one organization, but it was a very large organization, very tied to a really big vendor in our space. We're doing digital twins and huge projects with manufacturing organizations. So yeah, cybersecurity is coming along for the ride, right? That was kind of, but that's, like you said, not a lot of organizations are doing that, from the larger firms to the smaller. And the people that IT work with aren't necessarily the people that the OT would work with. I've worked with a lot of IT and security organizations who just don't have this capability or don't have that understanding. And I remember when I was building the practice area for one of my past employers, we know if these things go off, we have to tell somebody about it. But everybody that's in a traditional cybersecurity SOC doesn't know what to do when the PSI is off on this gauge over here, or this regulation. It's kind of like clinical systems, right? In healthcare, if something's wrong with the MRI machine, the IT guy doesn't go and fix it. So now you've got this whole other distributed organization of vendors and partners that have to deal with things, or you need to start training people who can say, oh yeah, that PSI regulator is messed up because of ... right?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because there's a lot of point solutions in those plants and there's no correlation across to your exact point on why is my filler not running optimally per se, or why is the conveyors, backing up, and why is the pressure off, why is the temperature off, and there's no correlation that's capturing information and data from multiple data sets around that plant floor to help determine what might be causing that.
It's a different world. And then again, the remediation part is all very different. So it's super fascinating to me, but I would also agree, like you said,
and we're working on that, by the way.
There's a gap of people honestly, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about, because there's a huge problem in cybersecurity in general. We have a lot of people who want to work here and not a lot of jobs, especially at the middle and entry level areas. But I feel like OT is probably very underserved. And I think you could probably make a good case for some people with some mechanical and technical backgrounds on the shop floor to become a little network savvy and start to supplant. I know Mike Holcomb, buddy of mine, he's always, giving out educational content on little plug for him and all his YouTube and LinkedIn stuff. There's a lot of stuff that can be learned. And this is this area of cybersecurity is like security itself is still new. I mean, I was doing it before it was called cybersecurity, and I've only been doing it for 26 years. So OT is probably, still an infant.
Well, in the IT world, you're right.
Yeah.
They've had a long run at it, right? I mean, they've had a couple of decades of working on this. And in the OT world, not so much, right? And I was just at Rockwell Automation Fair right before Thanksgiving, and one of the biggest holes that they would say that's out there is cybersecurity in the manufacturing space. Of course, they would say that, being a manufacturing technology provider and supplier, but I witnessed it all the time, right? Which is why we had to build a practice, in this space for OT cybersecurity, because it just did not exist. Very few places to go and get it, right? And they're used to going to the IT vendors that they're used to have cybersecurity practices, but their expertise in that plant floor area is really weak, and they expect the client to figure it out. And the client's not going to figure it out by themselves. It's not. That's why we have a lot of them who'll say, we're not going to build a practice. We're just going to hire you guys, just like IT would have done, right? They would have provided, if I don't want to manage my network and my email systems or my CRM or my applications, I outsource it to firms that do that.
You can even look at the product landscape. Microsoft Defender for IoT OT was CyberX, right? It was actually one of my favorite products when I was building practice, alongside Clarity, Nozomi, a lot of these other ones that get, Palo Alto bought and acquired stuff for medical IoT. Like the IT organizations or the cybersecurity, like pure play cybersecurity companies weren't looking at this space. The innovators built some stuff and they were like, oh, cool, let me make some money.
Yeah.
Like I can... Yeah.
It's a very decentralized environment. IT's done a really good job of standardizing, right, and centralizing. That is not your plant floor. The life cycle is different, right? We're talking about equipment and assets that are out there measured in decades, not in 3 or 7 years. And so it's very hard to figure out an automated, a centralized approach, like putting in a Palo Alto or Fortinet firewall. Great technology, but very complex. And you have to have people with some great skills if you're going to put that stuff in there, because, it's intrusion prevention systems. And if it sees something it doesn't like, it'll just block it and stop it. Well, now you just shut down my $80,000 packaging line,
Yeah. And up until a few years ago, that Fortinet firewall didn't know what OT was. It was just like, what is this network traffic? And then somebody had to make a decision to be like, well, I guess that's okay, or it's not, right?
Right.
PLC, HMI, all that stuff is very different. It's not the same, it's not the same world that we live in the IT world. And I would, a really, really smart network engineer could probably look at some things and be like, oh yeah, I get it. But, a lot of other people who are more linearly trained and knowledge-wise are going to be confused by anything that's out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I mean, we still run into IT people that work in manufacturing environments and have for a decade or more that still don't know what the term SCADA or DCS or PLC or HMI. They'll ask that in the middle of a conversation, which is fine, but they don't know what this stuff is, and it's connected to your network.
Yeah,
right? But they don't know what it is. And again, it's because
it's not because it's air gapped.
Yeah. I never find that. I mean, I guess if I was walking in a nuclear power plant, you might get me to say uncle on that, but I never find stuff that's there.
Yeah, I've done some.
I can still walk in
stuff.
with my laptop. If I go to 10 plants, 8 of them will let us walk in with our laptops and plug it right into their environment. Our engineers do that every day. I got 500 engineers out there working across the United States with their laptops, and they go out there, and we're just one of the vendors. There's usually several system integrators or OEMs working in these manufacturing facilities on any given day.
Yeah, it's funny because as much as those plants, like they should understand physical security, a lot of them don't. As someone who sold a lot of pen tests across multiple areas, those are the ones that pen testers love the most, when they could go into like a utility organization or a substation or something, and it's just not that hard.
Well, and they've just like pushing patches out was disruptive. Yeah. Pen testing is also disruptive. So then they figured out that was disruptive, and they said, well, we'll do it when there's plant downtime. What good does that do when then everything's offline?
Yeah. Well, and I learned early on in my life that patching is not, you do not have to be 100% tomorrow. Like it has to be contextual, and it's very much okay, especially in, we talk about the CIA triad, right? Confidentiality, availability, integrity. In manufacturing and in healthcare, the A is the top. like availability is what matters most. Yes, we will try to protect things, but when it comes to somebody's life or us making money with this machine, like we're not going to change it. And
Yep.
so because of that, it's fine to be like, yeah, that critical patch, okay, but like let's actually do the threat model. How would somebody execute that on the shop floor in the environment and cause it to impact it? Okay, the likelihood is 1%, we're okay. The likelihood is 60%. Is there a compensating control we can put into place? Because
Yeah.
again, even then, like, well, the 60% chance that happens is going to cost us what? And what's the impact of that machine going down for however long time it takes, or how long do we have to take it down to run the patch? And then maybe it doesn't come back up. Like that's the other thing. FDA systems and stuff, like, you know.
Well, and in some ways, they tried to solve it by moving away from bare metal standalone machines to VMs, because that way you put a patch out and it broke the application. You can switch back pretty quick. But then you still got Windows 7 machines out there, right? I got a client that's got thousands of VMs that are Windows 7 HMIs. Or you have an OEM, back to that decentralized approach. You got OEMs that they're like, don't touch that machine, because if you try to upgrade it and or put a firewall in it or do anything that may manipulate the traffic, I'm not going to support you. Your warranty and is void. And so they leave it alone, which isn't a good answer either.
No.
Right. So there's ways to tackle the problem without being disruptive, to get the metadata that you need, to make informed decisions and determine how you want to move, set a path forward. Right. Okay. Otherwise, this stuff turns into shelfware as we've seen it. And on the budgeting side, the question there is IT, I think in a lot of cases want to see OT get some skin in the game and start thinking of how they're going to fund for some of these initiatives, right? And the value, well, not the value, but the situation on the OT side is you got CapEx, capital.
Yeah.
And you got OpEx. And that's the one that always gets squeezed, right? That's the one. And it's hard to get capital too, because you're talking about, multi-millions of dollars. It's going to take a few years to get it built, design, get it in, which I think is the best time to start thinking about that kind of stuff, right? Is during that capital plan and the capital investments that you're going to make. But IT needs to help OT structure their budget, I think, on this, where IT doesn't have to carry the burden all to themselves. Let OT step up and get some skin in the game. But that means their ecosystem, of their supply chain needs to also participate, and have the capabilities, have the practice, have the partner relationships to be able to provide, these technologies and these services and these designs and architectures of all of it, help them.
Yeah. On the budget side, it's like what I consider probably is the quickest way to fix it. Let's not say there's a failure. The quickest way to fix it is, again, taking those high level, what's the company want to achieve, and pushing those down so that the people working on the shop floor are responsible for the production manufacturing, have accountability to IT and cybersecurity, right? That is part of it can't all be on the CISO. Now, and this is something that I think a lot of people confuse. As security professionals, it is not our job to make decisions. It is our job to find the risk, tell you what it potentially is, could cost, and here are your options to fix, mitigate, or transfer. And then the business decides. And so that accountability set in the hands of the people who are responsible for that floor and making things run, and be like, hey, here's your risks, here's your costs, like this is part of your budget now, right? Just like everything else. If somebody buys a new ERP system, a new HRIS system, whatever it is, there's security requirements built into that acquisition, right? There's process. And that's just where we have to get, where security just has to be part of all of your business process. And I think OT is just the kind of last frontier.
Yeah, well, just like safety is on the plant floor.
Yes.
That's job one, right? And we've spent the last 2 decades, when I started working in manufacturing, you didn't have to necessarily have safety shoes or safety glasses or hearing protection, and now
tied up,
high vis vest. And now that's a requirement, and that's one of the things where IT still, I've seen them get run off the plant floor, off the side, because they show up without their proper PPE, and the site manager's like, you guys got to go. You can't be here.
We need that's what I'm going to interrupt you. That's what we need. Like those site managers, those safety guards, and every industry has them. You need those people who are as passionate about cybersecurity as they are like physical safety. Like those are the people we need.
Right. But we call it digital safety, but it's a message that gets lost in translation to the organization. It gets back to your board speak, of how do you get that leadership to really to start putting an emphasis on it. It's not that it's not happening, but how do you get it down to where you need it? Right. And if you're a big organization, it's got 100 plants, 50 plants, it's a journey, right? It's definitely a journey.
Like, that's my sort of closing argument to all this. Like, it's a journey, right? At the end of the day, you're not going to just be secure tomorrow. Like, you have to be like, where am I at today? Where do I want to get to? And where you want to get to, maybe where I want to get in 6 months, 18 months, 2 years. Like, it's just longevity, and you've got to adapt to the technology that's moving. It's about having a mindset that is, again, just like safety, risk aware first.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great conversation. I don't know if there's anything specific you wanted to cover that we didn't talk about.
Ben, Dino, I'm here for you and your audience, but whatever if I can help somebody, teach somebody, I'm happy. That's all I care about.
Perfect. Well, appreciate the time. It's nice to meet you, Wil.
Good to meet you too. Appreciate you being on the show.
Merry Christmas.
You too.
Thanks for tuning in to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. And if you found this podcast helpful or have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please leave us a review or let us know. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.